The Seahawks find themselves in uncharted waters, having lost 4 games in a row for the first time in the Pete Carroll era. Even so, Seattle remains tied with 4 other teams for the final NFC playoff spot, heading into a Monday night showdown against the Philadelphia Eagles. Joining us to break it all down is former Seahawks beat reporter, current co-host of the Ringer NFL show, and Philly native Sheil Kapadia. Let's light him up. I'm Jackson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts. Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jackson Bevins, and along with my ostentatious producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Mike, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Jackson. Surprisingly well after watching yet another fun-filled Seahawks Sunday.
It looked for a second like they might hang in there.
It did. I was in the Bay Area this weekend and surrounded by I was at a restaurant during the game, surrounded by Deebo Samuel jerseys and Brock Purdy apologists, and they let me have it. That's all I'll say.
I'm sure.
But at first it was kind of like, oh, okay, all right, Drew, like stepping up to the plate a little bit here, and then it quickly reverted into Drew Lock football.
Yeah, it did, and you know, you did bring it upon yourself by showing up in nothing but your 12th man Speedo. So, yeah, I mean, you made yourself a target, to be fair.
You know, I had no choice but to be double cheeked up on a Sunday afternoon.
Oh, that's a great pull. Love it. Well, look, man, what can we say? We knew this was in the range of outcomes, and while the Seahawks have so far failed this midseason test, it's been encouraging to see them be competitive in the last 2, at least for a good portion of those games. We'll get into all of that and more with our guest, but first, if you're listening or watching us right now, it's hopefully because you like the show. And if you like the show, there are a few ways you can support it. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, take a couple of seconds to leave us a 5-star rating, and if you're feeling super supportive, a quick review as well. You can do that right now. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll find full video episodes, entertaining clips, and the audio reads of every Cigar Thoughts article after each game this season. This is probably the best way to help the show grow, and growth is going to enable us to bring more of our football discourse your way. So we're grateful for the few seconds it takes to like and subscribe. We're also thrilled to announce an awesome new partnership with Westland Distillery in Seattle, which is my favorite local whiskey maker. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see me enjoying a glass of their Outpost Range Solum, which has a delightful bite to it that really makes the flavor of these cigars pop. Westland is an American single malt whiskey distillery in the Soto neighborhood of Seattle. Their tasting room and bar is open to the public, serving whiskey flights, cocktails, and small bites. There's a bottle shop on site featuring distillery exclusive releases and more. They're located at 2931 First Avenue, a little over a mile south of Lumen Field. Needless to say, I'm stoked to be working with them, and one of the reasons I love their whiskeys so much is that they make excellent pairings with a good cigar. And speaking of, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. Until now, you've been able to order your own bundle of 10 for just $169, which is less than half of what this blend sells for in cigars on the open market. But because it's the holiday season, we are making them available to you for just $149. That's right, just $149. And as many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year-aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. And the cigars, they come with a Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. Now, to the other business at hand. The Seahawks are, incredibly, far from out of the playoff picture, even though it doesn't feel like it. That's because, even with the Seahawks losing to the 49ers for the second time in 3 weeks, there just aren't very many good teams in the NFC. That said, Seattle will need to finish the season strong in order to have any shot at postseason play, and that means finding a way to beat the 10-3 Philadelphia Eagles. It's precisely because of that I'm thrilled to introduce the man sitting down with us today. Some of you will recognize him from his excellent tenure as a member of the Seahawks beat, and others of you know him as an NFL writer and co-host of the popular Ringer NFL show with another friend of the pod, Ben Solak. Most importantly, like us, he's just seen his hometown team get whacked by the Cowboys and 49ers in consecutive weeks. He is Sheil Kapadia. Sheil, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's good. I feel like we do this annually where the Seahawks are always in. We never know what kind of state they're going to be in. I think we probably did it.
That's fair.
We did it last year, and I was like, man, I was completely wrong about this team. They're much better than I thought. And then I thought I picked them to win the NFC West. This year, I was feeling good about it.
Yeah.
And here we are with the first 4-game losing streak of the Pete Carroll era. But hey, like you said, there's still time left. So who knows how the final 4 weeks will go.
It's wild. I'll be completely honest. I didn't even think. Usually at the end of my article after the game, I try to zoom out, take a look at, okay, forget this game. Where are they at overall? And I didn't even do that because I was like, 4 straight loss. It's over. And then when I was prepping for the show, I was looking up the NFC playoff picture, and the Seahawks are tied still technically for the last spot in the NFC. I mean, they've got the tiebreakers over a couple of those teams. They lose tiebreakers to a couple others, but it's very much still in their hands, which is wild.
Yeah, and look at the teams you're competing with. I mean, Nick Mullins is in there. We can't let any of those NFC South teams, if they cannot get a second team in the playoffs, gosh. Or else
what an indictment! What an indictment against the conference.
Happen. So
seriously,
in terms of the fun rankings, the Seahawks getting in would certainly be better than all the alternatives. I think most people would agree.
You heard it here. The 2023 Seahawks. Better than some of the other teams. A ringing endorsement 13 games into the season. All right, man. Hey, I am excited to get your thoughts on the Monday night game this week. But first, let's talk about Seattle's matchup against the bane of both of our teams' existences right now, the San Francisco 49ers. What stood out to you most about that battle as you were watching it?
I mean, they were going to face an uphill climb. They were huge underdogs. They were wanted to go to 13.5 before the game once everyone realized Drew Lock was going to start. I mean, just what has stood out to me, and it's probably not fair, honestly, because the 49ers are making every team look like this. The previous week, they scored, if you thought that Seahawks game was bad, they scored touchdowns on 6 straight possessions against the Eagles the previous week. So they're really, I've been waiting all season, hey, is there going to be that sort of juggernaut team this year? And that 49ers offense, by every number, metric, X and O you look at, it's like they're giving everyone problems. But with this Seahawks defense specifically, I'm just kind of looking at it like they've poured a lot of resources into this group. When you look at what they gave up for Jamal Adams and drafting Witherspoon, who's been fantastic, and trading for Leonard Williams and signing Draymond Jones and Saquon, they poured a lot of resources into it. And what are they, 26th in defensive DVOA, something like that? And it's just been year after year after year, really, since I was there, I think, covering the team in 2015 and 2016. Since that, they've just tried different tweaks here and there, whether it's coaching, whether it's personnel, and they have not been able to rise above mediocrity with that defense. And so that group, I think, has been disappointing this year. And it's not, again, not just that 49ers game. They're making everyone look like that. But you can look at the previous week against Dallas where, man, if you get just one stop there with as well as the
How about one punt? Played. Can you give me one punt?
One punt, yeah. So that's kind of what was my big picture take. I wasn't going to read too much into the offense with Drew Lock starting there, but defensively, it's been 5 years. They haven't been able to find the answers.
You know what? I'm glad that you started there because that is the biggest conundrum to me. And you said it. I mean, they've tried a lot of things. I think, in back half of 2016, through even you could buy them 2019. They're trying to figure out that post LOB, era. You got to a point where the league kind of figured out how to beat that cover 3. And so it's not just, even if you could reload the talent, which obviously you're never going to be able to reload Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Michael Bennett, on and on. But even if you could, the scheme was starting to get figured out. And so now you've got all new talent. You've got money being allocated in different ways. And like you said, they've tried different coordinators. the grace period is up for me. Like, you have a defensive head coach. This is the thing, right? Almost every fan is frustrated with their offensive play calling and execution, right? There's a few teams that aren't. For the most part, most teams are. But the thing that bought you grace for that was that Pete Carroll is going to have a great defense. And so that's going to be okay. And he doesn't. And I don't know how much of that is Pete, how much of that is they've had the wrong guys playing the calls, how much of it is John Schneider picking the wrong guys. But you know what? I don't think it's that last thing. I don't think it's a talent or a personnel issue.
Yeah, I always, when I talk about, coaching, I always like to use the very simple, like, are you doing more with less, or are you doing more with more? Are you doing less, less with more? And
right.
So you can kind of compare it that way, listen, some of their players, I do think, aren't exactly what they thought. Someone like Jamal Adams, like he's not going to be exactly what you thought you were getting, and you have to use him in a very specific way, and you poured resources into it. So you're going to you paid him and you give him, so you're going to stick with it. But that does kind of put some limitations on how flexible you can be, how you want to use other guys. The pass rush, they've tried different things. You lose Nwosu for the year. That doesn't help, those kinds of things. So it's probably been a little bit of everything. I mean, the truth is, defensive football in the year 2023 is really hard. I mean, it's like you mentioned that with offensive play calling, it's probably similar with a lot of teams, and they're looking at their defenses. Like, who are the great defenses? Like we could say, like, the Cowboys are probably a top 5 defense. And look at what the Seahawks did to them.
That's right.
2 weeks ago. And so I think there's a lot of that going around. Like, it's just hard to come up with the answers. I think offense is ahead of defense. So much of it is just like, who are the opponents you're playing? That's the big conversation in Philadelphia. It's like, last year the offense ranked, and it's like the best quarterback they beat was Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins. And they just went through a stretch where they played Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott. I'm missing somebody else, but it's like,
you're missing the best of them all. Brock Purdy.
Brock Purdy, there you go. The Brock Purdy and that Niners offense. So a lot of it is just like, what is your strength of schedule? And then you need the randomness when you're facing those great teams.
You do.
Does a turnover go your way? Can you recover that fumble? Can you force them into like those 2 mistakes throughout the course of a game? You're not going to force those teams into 3 and outs over and over and over again. That's not what defensive football is in the year 2023. It's just so different now.
Yeah. And it's worth saying, and we've mentioned it before on this show, and other people covering this team have as well. But look, the Seahawks defense was good this year when Nwosu was out there. Like, they were top 3 in pressure rate and pass rush win rate and all of these underlying metrics. And then also forcing turnovers at a high rate and getting sacks at a high rate. Explosive plays on defense that Seattle hasn't seen in half a decade. And that was so encouraging because, as I'm fond of saying, you're allowed to be bad and you're allowed to be boring, but you can't be both. And and the Seahawks were neither for the first half of the season. So it's like, you lose Nwosu and your depth up front gets exposed because now they're trying to move Draymond Jones outside. Jaron Reed Leonard Williams is helping Jaron Reed carry all the weight inside now, but Darrell Taylor's just not it. They're trying to manufacture pressure. They're blitzing Devon Witherspoon a bunch, which is cool, but you'd like to be able to get some pressure outside of that. And so there's this domino effect that I think exposes the depth. But then you also look at who the teams that they were playing, 11 sacks against the Giants. It's shutting down the Arizona Cardinals. It's, playing really good games against the Cleveland Browns. But, also, and the thing that made me think they might actually be good was when they shut down the Bengals. The Bengals completed like their first 15 passes, scored touchdowns in the opening drives. And I think they got like 2 first downs on their final 10 drives or something. And I was like, okay, here we go. You lose Nwosu and it's just dominoes from there. So, I mean, I'd like to think it's an off season away from shoring up, but it feels like the issue for me with the defense isn't talent. It's connectivity. There always seems to be 1 or 2 guys that isn't doing the right thing.
Yeah, and they're still, you talked about how they moved away a little bit from the cover 3 of the Legion of Boom days. I was just looking up the numbers today. They're still playing that at a pretty high rate, but they're mixing in those split safety zones quite a bit. And so they're still, I think, the second highest zone coverage team in the NFL. And so it's like you mentioned, zone coverage is all about being on a string and knowing, all right, we know how they're going to attack us. We know when they try to attack this weak area, who's running with this guy, how are we covering it, knowing those different route concepts, having everyone's eyes on the quarterback so that you can come up with turnovers. I mean, that's why you play a lot of zone coverage. I think that's why Pete Carroll likes playing a lot of zone coverage, because, theoretically there are more chances for takeaways when everyone's kind of got their eyes forward and you're not trailing a receiver. But you're right, it just hasn't been there for whatever reason. They've got some younger players, obviously Witherspoon and
Sure.
Woolens in his second year, and then they've got the mix of veterans who, like we said, are the same athletes maybe they were in their prime. So it's kind of that they're in that in-between area where it's a little bit of a weird mix. You probably still need, I would say, either that pass rush to be a next level higher than it is now, or just for some of those younger players to get those reps, or to add some more athleticism on the back end right now.
On the other side of the ball, there's been a really interesting dichotomy with Seattle, whereas their EPA in the first quarter this year is like top 4. Like on the scripted plays, Shane Waldron is cooking. And we saw it again, even with Drew Lock on that opening drive against the 49ers, 4 for 5, 68 yards, a perfect contested catch, go get it ball to DK Metcalf at the front pylon. And it was like, maybe there's a conversation to be had after all. And then, like, you remember that you have to play the second, third, and fourth quarters also. And, I've been, yesterday, I had kind of a longer conversation with another of our favorite people in this sphere, C-Mike Spin Move, Griffin Sturgeon. And we were talking about EPA splits. And, he was asking me my thoughts on Waldron. I was like, man, I'm on such a yo-yo with him, because I feel like he's so good early in the game, but why can't he counterpunch? And, so he started diving into the EPA splits, and the Seahawks are top 5 in every single quarter in EPA on first and second down. And they're top 3 on third down in the first quarter in EPA. They are dead last on third down in every other quarter. It's just this like one thing that when you need the high leverage play and teams have started to make their adjustments to what you're doing, Seattle doesn't have an answer for it.
Yeah, third down in a lot of ways, it feels like it just kind of comes down to your playmakers. It could be your quarterback. It could be, does your wide receiver win one-on-one? Those are the situations where you're going to probably face more man coverage than you would on early downs. It's an obvious passing situation. So can you protect? I mean, that's probably, without having looked into the numbers, I would imagine that would probably be a big part of it. First and second
huge
down,
part of it, for sure.
Yeah, the defenses are, they got to play both. They're not sure, are you running? Are you passing? They might have a nose tackle in there. They might have some base personnel in there. Third down specifically, third and 4, 5, 6 or more, they know it's a passing down. We can kind of tee off on the quarterback a little bit. Seahawks have had injuries on their offensive line. And so that, just when you were mentioning it, I'm like, all right, I wonder why that is. I would guess that would be, I could be wrong, but I would guess that that's probably a big part of it.
Yeah. And, I think it's a similar effect that we saw on the defensive side with the loss of Uchenna and Nwosu. Abe Lucas got hurt in week 1. Right around halftime. And in the first half against the Rams, they had 3 scoring drives and 4 opportunities. 4 and 5, 4 scoring drives and 5 opportunities in that first half of the season. Abe Lucas goes down, and all of a sudden they have the 3rd highest pressure rate allowed in the NFL for the next 2 months. And then he comes back against the Cowboys. They don't punt, right? Like it's crazy how much better they are with this one player on the side of the ball. And look, I get it. They're less than 2 seasons removed from what was supposed to be a total teardown rebuild in the eyes of most people after the Russell Wilson trade. And so maybe it's unrealistic to expect that they just be so deep. It's not like the Eagles, where if you guys lost an edge rusher, it's just like, which of the next 7 guys is going to step up and mimic that production? So I do think it has a lot to do with the pass protection, but Sheil, man, we can be honest. That's every team in the NFL right now. Every team has to deal with pass protection. I feel like part of being a successful offensive coordinator in 2023 is the ability to deal with the fact that you're not going to have a lot of time to throw, which is why we're seeing the Shanahan and McVay tree offenses really do well because it's lots of motion, it's lots of misdirection. And I guess I'd just like to see a little bit more of that from Seattle.
There's no doubt you have to, find ways to scheme it up. Like every team's going to have an injury. Every team's going to have a couple injuries, some key injuries. How do you coach around it? As I always joke, that is what as Don Draper would say, that is what the money's for. That is why if it was easy, if everybody was healthy and good and could go out and play, well, why are we paying you again? Like that's the definition of coaching. You're paid to solve a lot of those problems. So I look at it overall. They're 11th in offensive DVOA. Yep. They've been a little hit or miss. Like I don't view that necessarily as a group that's underperforming its talent. Like I think before the season, I did my rankings. I think I had them in the top 10, but probably in that 8 to 12 area. So I would say they're probably, I thought they had some upside for sure, depending on what Smith and Jigba could give them as a rookie. I just thought those three guys are going to be very tough to defend for opposing defenses. But yeah, I think the protection aspect, especially, Geno has, I think, played well over 2 years. At the same time, is he at that level of, the elite guys where it's like, you could have 2 backup offensive tackles and 3 backup wide receivers, and like Josh Allen is still going to find a way to make 8 plays a game.
That's the thing.
Holy cow, how did he do that? So you don't have that like the situation still needs to be good around Geno. When it is, he can make plays. We've seen that. When it comes down a little bit, it's just going to be harder for him.
No, it's so true. I mean, the ecosystem is still super important, and I've generally held the belief since about halfway through last season. And look, most metrics are going to bear this out. Geno Smith's basically been a top 10 quarterback. And you'd have to work really hard to make a case that says he definitely isn't. But there's a huge difference between being a top 10 quarterback and being a top 5 quarterback. And it is the Mahomes, I think Jalen Hurts, the Josh Allens, Lamar Jackson. And I think you're also kind of talking about Herbert and Burrow, where the talent is just so massive and the feel for the game is so undeniable that, okay, you can miss a lineman, you can have a receiver go out. These guys, like you say, are still going to make the play. You're still scared of them on 3rd and 14. And, that Geno, I think Geno is actually a pretty freaking good quarterback as far as the NFL landscape goes right now. But you're right. He's not the pull your ass out of the fire 10 times a game quarterback.
Yeah. And there's no doubt he's exceeded expectations. I would agree with that. I mean, I haven't done my, specific rankings, but I would think he's got to be right around there, right around 10, right around 12. And it's not like, it doesn't have to be perfect around him. Like, to be clear, he will make tight window throws and he's aggressive and, he'll give his guys shots and he can climb the pocket and he doesn't have a bad feel for it or anything like that. They've just had some really tough, high leverage situations, or just, like that Bengals game. I remember watching that Bengals game earlier this season where I'm like, that's because I picked the Bengals to go to the Super Bowl, and I came away from that game like I don't think I watched it live. I watched it after, and I'm like, Seahawks should have won that game. Like Seahawks outplayed them in that game. And then there's that Rams game. I remember I said it on the Ringer NFL show after that one. I go, that could be the most devastating loss by any team all season. Like they had that game. And now you look at their schedule coming up, like, oh my gosh. And then we look at the Cowboys game 2 weeks ago. Like they have that game and then they can't get.
These are the games that Pete Carroll teams are supposed to be winning.
Yeah. And you don't have to win all 3. Like think about if they would have won one of them. If they win 2 of those, they're in great shape. If they win one of them, you're feeling pretty good. To lose all 3, that's kind of why they're, in this situation right now. And let's be honest, we don't like to admit it. There's luck factors in a big way. A little bounce here, a little bounce there, a penalty here, recovered fumble there. So those things I feel like haven't gone. You're right. It feels like a lot of that stuff has gone their way in previous years. They haven't gone their way this year.
No, it's true. I mean, for as upset as the second half of that second Rams game made Mike and I, they still were a field goal attempt away from winning that game. And this is still a team that won in overtime at Detroit. This is still a team that beat a very good Browns team with a last second touchdown. It hasn't all gone against them. It just feels like everything that went their way happened in September and October. And that was a long time ago. And so, recency bias really starts to creep in. It's like I said in the article on Sunday, if the Seahawks had started 0-4 and then went 6-3, we'd feel way differently about them being 6-7. But it went the other way. They started 6-3 and then went 0-4, and it feels like they're a lost cause.
That's how it goes. That's how it is there. It's like, it's wild. I mean, I don't know if it's just because I'm an old man now, but just the the swings week to week about where the opinions go on players, on teams and coaches. It's like, all right, so I guess nothing matters until, like Parcells used to say, until after Thanksgiving, I guess. But you kind of have to zoom out a little bit and be like, all right, what's happened in the last 2 weeks is not everything that has happened this season. Take a deep breath and see but it is true also that these teams, these coaches, these players, a lot of them will be judged on what happens in the next 4 weeks. I mean, that's just how it is.
It's so true.
That's what matters.
It's so true. And that's when injuries are at the highest. I feel like as an NFL fan, you're almost like day trading crypto, where it's just like these wild swings every single day. And it's like, no, you gotta zoom out and look at the all-time chart here before you get, before you get too caught up in what the most recent thing that happened was. And so I get it. It's one of the things we appreciate about you. One of the things we try and keep in mind is just that perspective that, okay, let's look at the overall picture. And it's been a rough month in Seattle, but I mean, again, the fact that they still have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs is encouraging given where they're at in the overall team development. Last thing I want to touch on with this game is your thoughts on just how much better than the rest of the league the 49ers are, if you feel that they are. And follow up, for how much longer can they get away with this fuckery?
That's the best question I've gotten during a podcast so far this year. I will give you credit for that. It took me a while. Coming into the season, I thought, all right, it's been 8 games of Brock Purdy. I'm not going overboard. I want to see more of him before I say they can continue this pace. And he's played better than last year. Their offense is better than any other 49ers Shanahan offense we've seen. So I think 2 weeks ago I said, all right, I'm at the point where I think the 49ers are winning the Super Bowl. I think this is Kyle Shanahan's year. I just look at them offensively like, listen, there's a game in the playoffs where if they turn it over a couple times, they can lose that game. There's no doubt about it. But I don't see a defense that's going to limit them to 240 yards or force them to punt, 4 times during the course of a game. I just I don't know what the answers are. There's no coverage. There's no, if there is, I think I made the joke recently, if they have a playoff game where someone does that, whatever scheme that is or gameplay, that's the one.
That's the new blueprint.
Sam will be writing a book about that 10 years from now, because I don't know what it is. Play man coverage against those guys. Okay. Good luck, winning your one-on-ones against McCaffrey and Kittle and Ayuk and Debo. Play zone. They just have so many zone beaters with how Shanahan schemes it up and how aggressive Purdy is throwing the ball downfield. His decision making, his processing is very good. So I'm telling you, the numbers on their offense that I've dug into recently compared to the best offenses we've seen in the last 10 years, whatever offenses you think those are, they're right there or better than all of them. So I do think right now, as we sit here, there is a gap. Now, they got to stay, as you said, they got to stay healthy. It's the most boring part of analysis, turnovers and health. It's yes, we know you don't need to mention it, but they got to stay. If they're healthy, they're going to be my pick to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And, Kenneth Arthur recently did a great breakdown of the 49ers salary cap situation on his Seaside Joe newsletter. And, they are definitely loading up the credit card the way that the Rams did a couple years ago. They just feel even better than the Rams did a couple years ago. They're going to have some really tough decisions, including on someone. It's probably good I don't have an MVP vote, because if I did, the number one name on my ballot would be Trent Williams, because with him, they are a supernova. They are maybe the best offense since the Kurt Warner, Mike Martz offenses of the late 90s, early 2000s. Without him, they're 0-3, and they scored 17 points in every single game. For as much as I was just harping on Seattle for how much losing one player on offense in Abe Lucas or one player on defense in Chen Nwosu is, the 49ers, who are by all accounts the best team in the NFL, lost one player. I guess they were without Debo for a couple of those games too, but still, they didn't score any points.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like he's almost a bigger linchpin than Purdy or the rest of them.
Yeah, the O-line nerds, Brandon Thorne, who does a great job with his analyzing the offensive line, has the Substack Trench Warfare. Yeah, he talks about Trent Williams every year, just as the best offensive lineman in the NFL, the best offensive tackle in the NFL. And also, I think there's like a bit of a domino effect there, because you look at the rest of their offensive line, and it's really not the most talented group. Like right. You said about the Seahawks. They find ways to scheme around some of the weaknesses they have there, specifically at right tackle. So then when you lose your best guy, then it makes it harder for everyone else. So yeah, he's got to stay healthy. Those other guys have to stay healthy, but they have the luxury of they've got the quarterback on the 7th round rookie contract, and they can push money into the future and keep this window open as long as they want to. I think Ayuk is a free agent this offseason, but man, I'd be surprised if they let him walk. So I think, I'm always in favor of, when you have that window, it's okay to be a little reckless.
Yes.
If you're trying to win a Super Bowl. If you're the Saints, don't do it. If you're the 49ers, right. If you're rooting for the 49ers, you're like, yes, I want to keep all of our best players. I don't care if that means, 3 years from now, we're going to be in a little bit of a trouble.
Deal with it
this
then.
Is the whole point. Yeah, this is the whole point of building a franchise, is to have these moments, have these windows where you can win and not have to worry about the future.
Well, and it's so crazy too, because if it wasn't for Brock Purdy, the 49ers would be holding the L on maybe the biggest misuse of resources in the last 10 years by trading 3 first-round picks to get Trey Lance. And, nothing ever happened there. But it's like, of all the different types of COVID era debt relief that we saw, none was bigger than drafting Brock Purdy with the last overall pick, because he's forgiving that whole entire thing. Bailed him out.
Yeah. Where would they be? I don't know what they would be doing. Who would be their quarterback? Maybe Mac Jones? I don't know. I have no idea who it would be. It wouldn't be Trey Lance. I don't think it'd be Jimmy Garoppolo. You just take a flyer on day 3 of the draft, and here you go. You have the best offense of the last 10 years.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. You know what else is wild? The Seahawks have lost 5 of their last 6 games and are somehow, like we said, still just 1 game back of the 6th seed. But meanwhile, the Eagles were 2 games clear of the entire NFC 2 weeks ago. And yet, if the playoffs started today, they'd be the 5 seed. How'd that happen?
Well, where do we begin here? Let's say,
floor is yours.
Yeah, first they played the 49ers, and they had no chance of stopping the 49ers, who scored on 6 straight possessions. I think there was this lingering feeling among Eagles fans for the first, even when they had that 10-1 record, like, is this team as good as the record says it is? I think they were 7-1 in 1-score games. If you look at point differential, it was not in the same neighborhood as teams like the 49ers and Cowboys. And, then you hear all the cliche, this team just finds a way to win. And to be fair, it was like with Jalen Hurts, they were like 24-2 in his last 26. So like, even for someone like me who likes analytics and X's and O's, I'm like, I don't know, like, do I need to reconsider this team just knows how to win thing with this quarterback? So I think some of that caught up to them. They've got issues defensively, which, certainly we can get into. Offensively, it's been a little more hit or miss. It's been a little vanilla. It's been a little relying on a lot of one-on-one stuff, and your roster just being better than opposing rosters, stuff not going your way. And so you add all that up, and it's been 2 blowout losses to your biggest competition in the NFC. And to be fair, they're still like pretty well positioned here. I think even if they lose this game to the Seahawks, they've got the Giants twice, and the Cardinals once in the final 3, where they would still be in a good spot, I think, to win the NFC East, but probably not in a good spot unless the 49ers really stumble to get that 1 seed. So that's kind of been the way their season has gone. Whereas last year, everything felt easy. They were blowing teams out. They're sitting guys in the 4th quarter. And then this year, even when they were winning, like, there were a couple games in there where you're like, oh, okay, they look legit. But a lot of those games, you're kind of like, ooh, that took a lot, kind of some bounces to go their way late for them to get to 10-1.
One of the penalties of success in the NFL, and there are many, the way that the league is set up, is basically having your coaching staff get headhunted. So it feels to me, you mentioned, there's some sense among Eagles fans. Are we as good as this 10-1 record? I didn't think that the Eagles were. I thought that you were the second or third best team in the NFL at the time. But it felt like, okay, I mean, you're sweating out 2 wins against the Commanders. You're trailing at halftime 5 or 6 consecutive games. It wasn't the formula from last year. So question for you is 2-parter. How close to being back on track is Philadelphia? And how big of the reason that they're off track is the loss of Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon?
Yeah, I don't think the coordinator thing is a huge deal. I mean, I personally don't think Jonathan Gannon is like a defensive mastermind.
Sure.
They faced, I think the Cardinals this year have like a bottom 3 defense in the NFL. Last year was a perfect storm for the Eagles defense. They had all 11 starters healthy for the Super Bowl. They faced, I think, the worst opposing offenses in the entire NFL. And so everything they were healthy. They faced a weak schedule and things kind of came together. I like watching them on a weekly basis. I wasn't like, oh baby, they're scheming things up and doing a great job here. It was kind of like their players were just better than the opponent players and opposing players, and they faced bad quarterbacks. Anytime they faced a good quarterback, they got lit up. So I feel like if Jonathan Gannon were on the Eagles defensive coordinator this year, facing the 49ers and Mahomes and Allen and Prescott twice and the Dolphins, I think their defense would be the same or worse this year. So I don't think that's a big factor. Offensively, you could probably make a stronger case, that Shane Steichen has done a nice job with the Colts this year, and maybe losing him has led to some of their regression. At the same time, they've got offensive-minded head coach. You mentioned it with Pete Carroll. Nick Sirianni was a wide receivers coach and then an offensive coordinator. And so it's still his offense at its heart. So a little bit, yes, I would say with the coordinators, but probably not like the big. I would say it's a little overrated if I'm being honest. I forget what the second part of the question was. I told you I'm old. It's like I got dealing with a little bit of a cold. Like this isn't my flu game, but you'll have to forgive me and remind me what the second part of the question was.
No, just the question was just how close to being back on track are the Eagles?
Yes.
And I'll piggyback on that. As you're thinking about the things that are off track, if you really feel like there are things that are off track with the Eagles, is Seattle positioned to exploit those things?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple. I don't know that the Eagles are back on track. I mean, listen, the stats are going to look better down the stretch. That's just because they're going to play the Giants twice and the Cardinals once, and they're going to be in the playoffs, and we'll see what they look like at that time. It's going to be hard to shake those performances against the 49ers and the Cowboys. And so offensively, I would say I have more confidence. They're still very healthy there. Their offensive line is very good. You still have Hurts. You still have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Like, there should be answers there offensively where you look pretty good here down the stretch. Defensively, I'm not so sure. And that's where when you ask, can the Seahawks expose some of that stuff, it's really going to come down to, can they block up this Eagles defensive line? The Eagles have had this organizational philosophy that overinvest in the offensive line and in the defensive line and figure everything else out. It's been a pretty good philosophy. They've won a lot of games with it. They've gotten to the Super Bowl a couple times in the last, 6-7 years by doing that. That pass rush is underperforming in a big way right now. They've got, on third down, they're the worst third down defense in the NFL. You were mentioning the Seahawks on third down. So this is going to be a battle because I think the Eagles are 32nd in defensive DVOA on third down this year. And a big part of that is their pass rush isn't winning. They have the lowest sack rate of any defense on third down in the entire NFL.
That is insane to me. I would have bet that they would have the highest going into the season.
Yeah, and I know, and people say, well, all right, coverage is tied to pass rush. I mean, I've looked at the numbers, and teams are not getting rid of the football quickly on third down against them. It's pretty much league average. There is time to get pressure to produce those negative plays. Last year they were first, to your point, on third down, and it was some wild number. It was 19% of the time on third down they were producing a sack. This year it's 5% of the time, and so it could be a number of things. Some of their players like Josh Sweat, very good defensive end. He's already played more snaps this year than he did last year. They poured resources into defensive tackle with the two Georgia guys, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. At Georgia, those guys rotate. Like, they did not play a lot of snaps. They've got so many guys, and now they're being asked to play a lot of snaps. And I think Sweat, Carter, and Davis are without a sack, those three combined, in the last 4 games. So it's like they're not affecting the quarterback as much as they need to. And then they're old in the back end. They've got 4 of their 5 defensive backs are 30 years or older.
Right.
Man, when they face the 49ers, you're just like, they look slow. Like, is one team on 1.5 speed and the other team on regular speed, or what's going on here? Because the 49ers were just running right past them. So it's kind of a combination of all those things. So I do think if the Seahawks can protect, assuming Geno's back, give him some time, there's just going to be opportunities in the passing game for them for sure.
So what you're telling me is that when the Seahawks have the ball on third down, it's the stoppable force versus the movable object?
Yeah, what's going to happen? Both sides are going to try to give that one away. Yeah, we'll see what it looks like.
I wasn't thinking about this before the show, and I probably should have, but I'm thinking about it now. So I'm going to ask you, if you had a vote for Defensive Rookie of the Year and you had to cast it right now, I think there's a feeling that the top 2 candidates for that award are going to be playing in this game. Would you lean Devon Witherspoon or Jalen Carter?
Oh, man. How many games did Witherspoon miss earlier this season?
Just the one, I believe.
It was just one? Okay. Oh, man. That would be one where I would need to get out all my nerd stats, watch the film, and make it. I think you're right. I think those are probably the 2 guys. I mean, I'm trying to think who else. Will Anderson has had a nice year.
Yes.
In Houston. But I do think, like Jalen Carter at the halfway point of the season, I would have said Jalen Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably wouldn't have had I would have said Witherspoon's had a very nice year, but Jalen Carter is like, aside from Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh's rookie year, like this guy.
Totally.
And it's not just the numbers. I mean, the film, like every week, was just like, holy cow. Like, I have not seen defensive tackles do this on a weekly basis. It's been a little bit quieter, though. Like I said, I think he's gone 4 straight games without a quarterback hit. So it really could come down to the last 4 games. Honestly, in terms of like the narrative, if Witherspoon plays this week, like this game could go a long way.
Totally.
This game will stick out in people's minds about Monday Night Football, big spot, which one of them shows up here. So I'm a terrible podcast guest. You asked me a question, and I'm not even giving you a take. I'm saying I need more time with it.
Man.
I don't know.
Hey,
it's
listen,
just how I feel.
Listen, an honest I don't know is so much better than a manufactured take. Like, because I know that if you say I'm not sure yet, it's not because it's for good reason. So we'll let you cop out of this one. All right. So one last question.
Jackson, who do you think it is?
I would vote right now. So I also would have a month ago given Jalen Carter the vote, and I know that it's going to piss off a lot of Seahawks fans. I just thought he was having a bigger effect on games than Devon Witherspoon was, and that's no knock on Devon Witherspoon. Right now, I would give it to Devon Witherspoon. I mean, he's just had a better last month, even though they've been losing all these games. It's not like they're losing because Devon Witherspoon is getting exposed. The guy is playing like a veteran out there. And like Mike and I were talking about 2-3 weeks ago, he might be the best player on this team this season. And it is really, really rare for a rookie, especially a defensive rookie, to be able to have a claim to that. And sure, maybe that's an indictment of the rest of the team a little bit too. I'd say probably now it's DK Metcalf, but he was playing through a bunch of injuries early in the season. And now the DK Metcalf discourse is so busted in Seattle. It's just like, how are you guys not just thrilled that this dude is on your team all the time? But for some reason, this is a point of contention. But it's like, now that he's healthy, he's showing everybody just why he's been one of the most high profile wide receivers in the NFL. And in fact, him and AJ Brown as like the 2 prototypes of the modern NFL receiver and former college teammates going head to head in this game is going to be cool too. But okay. So last question about this game, because you've covered the Seahawks and you've covered the Eagles. You know enough about these 2 fan bases to answer this question. Is the fallout worse if Seattle loses or if Philly loses?
Good. I think I would probably have to say the Seahawks, only because the stakes are like Eagles fans will be angry, which is their natural state anyway, their most comfortable state. I was joking earlier, like everyone made the joke earlier this season that it was like the perfect Eagle season because they were winning games, but the fans still had so much to be angry about after every win. So it's like,
totally,
this is perfect. So I think if the Eagles lose this game, don't get me wrong, there will be panic. There will be wild takes flying left and right, but after a few days they can sit back and be like, all right, we got this easy schedule, the final 3 weeks, we're still in a good spot, we're going to make the playoffs, maybe you're going to still win the division. I mean, if the Seahawks lose this one, they're still not going to be out of it. There's no doubt they still will have a chance to win their final 3 and be in the mix, but man, 5 in a row for it feels weird just saying that for a Pete Carroll led team. 5 games in a row, it never happened or never happened. So I think that would probably be the one. And also just kind of the way their team is built. It's not like you have a 24-year-old quarterback who it's like, all right, all good,
right.
You showed improvement. They'll be back next year. It's kind of like you felt like you can make a leap this year.
Yes.
And if you don't do it, and if you don't make the playoffs, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. So I would probably go with the Seahawks, I think.
Yeah. I tend to agree. And they're just 2 teams that are in different stages of their development for sure. I think the Eagles last year and this year is kind of where in the best part of Seattle's range of outcomes is where they are next year and the year following. They just got some work to do there. I feel like the pieces are there. But, it hasn't come together the way that we kind of got duped into thinking they were ready to put it together, given how much they had exceeded expectations last year and the hot start they got off to this year. Earlier in the episode, you mentioned the value of zooming out, which is something that Mike and I are big believers in. So let's do that here. Let's step away from these 2 teams and just looking at the conference, given the relative mediocrity of the NFC after the top 3 teams. How likely do you think it is that the Seahawks make the playoffs? Because y'all have essentially clinched already.
I'm pulling up my standings right now just to make sure I see the teams they're competing with here. All right, so we've got...
And just so you know, the Seahawks go Eagles, but then after that it's Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Arizona.
Okay. All right, so I was going to ask you earlier what the rest of their schedule looks like. All right, so I think they've got a good challenge. The Vikings at 7-6 with Nick Mullins. Come on. I don't think they're going to get in. So there's 2 spots to play. Now, I will say I have been on record as saying I think the Packers and the Rams are getting in. So I guess that would leave the Seahawks out there. I think those are the 3 teams, Packers, Rams, Seahawks. I think 2 of those 3 are getting in. I'm not telling you I feel extremely confident about it. I was just kind of falling in love with the Jordan Love story over that month of the season.
Tough not to.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, and then they took a step back, and they had it's a good Monday night was a good reminder, man, that we can look at this and I can say, oh, this team's schedule, and it's the Dolphins were 13.5-point favorites and had a 2-touchdown lead with 3-4 minutes left against a rookie quarterback, and they lost that game. So I'm gonna say Packers and Rams only because I've been on record and I don't want to be the fraud who goes on one podcast and says one thing and then on the other podcast says the other, and then people are meshing the takes together and I look like a fraud. So I got to stick with what I said originally. Now, so I'm gonna go Packers and Rams with the Seahawks just missing out there. So there you go.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate that you're not pandering here. We have you on because we want to know what you think. and I would say if I knew the same amount about every team and was a betting man, those are the 2 teams that I would bet on. It's looking more and more like an 8-9 team could get in, which is kind of gross. It's kind of the risk of allowing 7 teams from each conference in, which I think is better for the sport anyway. But so there is a chance that, Seattle at 6-7 could go 2-2 and get in. Problem is they lose the tiebreaker to the Rams because just straight up, no matter what, because they got swept. I do think the Rams need to play the 49ers one more time. And I'm not sure if they've played y'all yet. Have they?
Yes, the Eagles beat the Rams.
I'm not sure if they played
in the season.
the Cow. I think they played the Cowboys too.
The Cowboys beat them. Yeah, the Cowboys beat them early.
So they might only have the one tough game left.
They got the Commanders, the Saints, at the Giants, and at the Niners.
Okay.
as they actually could. You know what? This could be bad news because
that could be 2-2.
Yeah, well, the Niners also, but on the other hand, Niners they have the 1 seed locked up.
That's
which
so
is
true.
Not likely,
it's so true.
Yeah. So it's nice to be able to play the Niners in Week 18 versus when everyone else has to play them. But who knows?
Then it's up to the Eagles to keep that from happening.
Yeah, that's right. We'll see. But I don't think there's a lot separating those three teams: the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Packers. I think a lot of that will come down to injury luck, who's healthy, who's getting the random turnover. As much as this is terrible analysis, who's getting the random turnover?
It's true,
the random
though.
Call, the random DPI with in the fourth quarter that everyone's talking about the next day. But I would say those teams are pretty evenly matched. I mean, that Rams offense has been very impressive to me when they've had everyone healthy. The Packers have been coming on, but they're a very young team. I mean, it could go in either direction. I don't trust either of those defenses. And if Geno's healthy, this Seahawks passing game, like you said, if their offensive line is healthy, if Geno's healthy, they should be able to move the football, these teams down the stretch. But all those defenses are probably going to put a little scare into their fan bases a couple times here down the stretch.
Oh, yeah, no question about it. And look, for all of the turnover and debt paying that the Rams have had to do after that Super Bowl push, McVay and a healthy Stafford together is just as a football fan, I always say I'm a football fan first and a Seahawks fan second. Just as a football fan, it's so beautiful, man. I mean, some of these, so every week Stafford is giving you 3 or 4 throws that you're just like, maybe 5 guys, maybe 5 people out of 8 billion on the planet can do what he just did.
Yeah, it feels like he realizes kind of his age and is like, I don't know how many of these I got left. I'm just
totally.
gonna let it rip.
He's ripping it, man.
He's ripping it. You're right. He's had some of the most aesthetically pleasing throws of the year. If you made a list of the top 50
totally.
in the NFL, he would probably be the leader. I would agree with you there. Some of these are just beautiful, and then good McVay sort of having to reinvent himself a little bit with this group. I mean, I didn't think they were going to be good. They had a 35-year-old injured quarterback behind a unproven offensive line, and here they are with the top 8, top 10 offense so far this season. So yeah, that's been one of the many things I was wrong about coming into the season.
All right, last thing before we let you get out of here. If it's not San Francisco, who do you think is most likely to win the Super Bowl this year?
Not San Francisco. All right, the chalk take would probably be. Don't count out the Chiefs, right? That would probably be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say. Is it maybe it's the Ravens' year? I don't know. I mean, it's a weird year, and it's like if they don't do it this year, when are they going to do it? You know what I mean? It's just like I think they've got the best defense in the NFL. Lamar is healthy and playing well. The kicking game's going to be good. The coaching is going to be pretty good. And they should have the 1 seed if they don't stumble here down the stretch in the AFC. So I think that would be my Super Bowl right now. Ravens Niners, if I had to pick it, with the Niners winning it. But if you tell me the Niners aren't going to win it, I think the Ravens would probably be my pick.
I lean that way too. I think that there's the tier 1 is the 49ers, and then tier 2 has. God, it's so tough because I think if you just look at the actual football that's been played, I think the tier 2 is 3 teams, and I would put them in order. I would go Ravens, Eagles, Cowboys. But betting against January Mahomes and January Andy Reid just doesn't feel like the Chiefs aren't one of the 4 or 5, most likely teams to win this Super Bowl. I would love, me personally, and just what I value when I'm watching football, which is creativity and innovation and just juice. I would love to see the Dolphins make a run. I think seeing that offense against the 49ers offense in the Super Bowl would be really, really cool. We saw it last night. They're just, for a number of reasons, they're not quite there yet. They haven't really beaten a good team yet this year, and you got to beat 2 of them to get to the Super Bowl at the very least. They'll probably have to beat 3 of them. So I'm with you. I think it's the Ravens.
Yeah, and Dolphins have a pretty tough schedule, I think, here down the stretch. I think they still play the Ravens. I think they still play the Bills.
Yep, they do.
This year. If you wanted my wild, like, hey, we need something for social media, I would be like, hey, listen, I'd be like, don't sleep on the Bills. I know we don't.
Okay, I'm glad you said it. I think the Bills are actually one of like the 5 best teams in the NFL this year.
Crazier things have happened. I mean, they sneak in with Josh Allen just being like, I got nothing to lose. Just here, hop on my back, and I'm going to make every play here. I wouldn't want to face them if I was like a 2 seed or something, and all of a sudden Josh Allen's
worst nightmare.
Like that would suck.
Worst nightmare is that you draw the Bills in the first round of the playoffs as a whole team and a higher seed. That'd be a tough draw. I mean, I don't want to bet against Sean McDermott's motivational speeches right now.
Listen, who knows what'll break out? Yeah, he can get those guys. He can get those guys to do anything. I'm going to leave it at that. I would agree with you.
Fair enough. All right, brother. Hey, thanks again for coming in. We appreciate you so much, Sheil. I'm always excited at the opportunity to talk ball with you.
Always good to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. It was fun.
Our pleasure. Finally, before we get out of here, where can those listening find more of you?
Yeah, we do the on the Ringer NFL feed. The show's called Extra Point Take, and me and Ben Solak every Monday night after Monday Night Football, and then we do a Friday show looking to the week ahead. So we have a lot of fun with that, and then we do the Ringers Philly special, just in case there's any Philly people listening. You can check that out on the Ringer as well.
All right, y'all. That's going to do it for today. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media as well. I am on Twitter at Jackson Bevins. That's JACSON. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, and find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com/cigarthoughts. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Finally, be sure to check out cigarthoughtsnfl.com to get your exclusive Cigar Thoughts cigars, or hit me up on Twitter and I'll shoot you the deets. And when you buy those cigars, reach out like many of you have and tell us what you think. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of this show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it's an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.